Previously, I have said that there are 3 levels of complexity to a shader. The basic level is the homogeneous shader. The second level is the shader that have a texture to it, but the texture is only a procedural, mathematically calculated texture. The third level is that you add a photographic texture to it. And if you want to create very realistic results, or if you have a specific look that you want to achieve on the surface, it is usually you usually need to apply the third level. You need to apply photographic textures on the shader. And when I say photographic textures, I mean 2D images. And those 2D images are JPEGs or TIFF that you have on the hard drive. So it's nothing strange in that. And the 2D images can be painted in Photoshop. So they don't have to be photographic in that sense. But usually you start with a photograph and then manipulate that photograph in Photoshop in order to make it look as you want it to. And very, very often you combine different photographs. Let's say that you want to have a surface that looks like rusty metal, for example. Then of course it is very convenient to take a photograph of a rusty surface and apply that as a texture. And I have an image library with lots of different broken up and dirty and rusty surfaces. And as I said, you almost always want to manipulate the texture so that it fits your model. And I'm going to just give an example how it looks here. In order to apply a photographic texture, I click on the checkerboard icon here. But instead of choosing one of the procedurals, I select this one, the file. And that one creates a file node where I link or connect to an external JPEG or TIFF image by browsing for it. And I'm going to use one of the files that I have in one of the projects I'm working on right now. Let's see, we have it on the textures, and this one, for example, we can take just as an example. So this is it has started as 2 or 3 photographs that I have mixed together in Photoshop. So very much of the work that you do when you do shaders is actually work that you do in Photoshop. And as you see, you get a kind of quick representation of how it looks. If I render the image, I will see more closely how it will actually look when I render it. And you will see 2 things. One is that both of the geometries, the cube and the sphere, get the same texture. And sometimes you want to achieve that effect, but often, of course, you want to have different textures on different geometries. And in that case, you need to create different shaders. You will also see that the textures are applied onto the geometries in a quite strange way. It is almost as if you have a gift wrap paper that you are wrapping around the geometry. And there are many different ways of wrapping it around the geometry. And I will get back to that in another movie. One thing that I want to conclude this movie with is how to work with rendering when you are working with shaders, because very often you are doing lots of manipulation and changes, and you don't really see how it looks here. You see a kind of representation of it, but it's not really truthful. So in order to actually see how the geometry and the shader look together, you have to render it. And if you render it and then change something, you can render it again to see the change, but that of course takes a lot of time. So one very good thing is to either you can drag a marquee and render just a region. If I make a change here and render that one again, you will see that it was only the highlighted or the selected region that gets rendered. And that tool is very useful when you have a render that takes very long time. In this case, the rendering takes very short. It's just a couple of seconds. If I do a render here, it takes 2 seconds or so. But if it's a very complex model with complex shaders, it might take many seconds or maybe minutes even. And in that case, it's very convenient to be able to render just a region of the object. Another very good tool is the IPR render. If I press this small clapperboard icon here with IPR on it, Maya renders a kind of temporary render. And if I select a region here and then make changes, you'll see that the changes that I make are updated in real time. And that's very convenient, because in that way I can manipulate the shader and immediately see the different results. In this case, I used the incandescence, for example, to create a glowing effect. And then when I am satisfied here, I can make a full render and see the final result. Usually the IPR render gives the same result as the full final render. But some things like ray tracing, for example, doesn't work together with IPR render. So if you use ray tracing as a render setting, then you need to do full renders.